So let's talk about Polycarp of Smyrna. You've probably heard the name, a saint, a martyr, a direct link to the apostles themselves. But what if the story we've all been told is, well, more legend than actual history? Today, we're diving headfirst into the heated debate around this absolutely pivotal figure from the early church. These are his famous last words, right? An incredible statement of faith that's echoed for almost 2,000 years. But is that the whole story? We're going to explore whether this is a rock-solid historical account or a legend that was carefully and brilliantly constructed. And to really unpack all this, we're going to stage a little debate between two powerful perspectives. In one corner, you've got Athanasius. He sees Polycarp as this vital, living link in an unbroken chain of faith. And in the other corner, we've got Marcus, our skeptic, who seriously questions if we can trust these ancient stories. Let's see how their arguments stack up. Okay, so the entire foundation of Polycarp's authority, the reason he's so important, really rests on this one, single, monumental claim, that he was a direct disciple of the Apostle John. Now, for Athanasius, this connection is absolutely undeniable. Think about it. Polycarp didn't just read the Gospels. He learned them from the man who literally laid his head on Jesus' breast at the Last Supper. His whole life was basically a living, breathing testament to that idea that the Word became flesh. But here's where Marcus steps in and says, hold on a minute. He wants us to pause and think about the simple, powerful force of time itself. This timeline right here, this is Marcus's central point. Can we really, honestly trust an 86-year-old's memories of stories he heard way back in his youth about events that happened almost 100 years before that? Marcus suggests that the early church, which was, desperate for authority in a world of competing beliefs, might have just manufactured this connection to make itself seem more legitimate. But Athanasius fires right back. He says the proof is in the pudding, in the consistency of what Polycarp taught. His letter to the Philippians is just soaked in what would become the New Testament, proving the Gospels were already seen as inspired. This was a man whose holiness was so respected that people would literally fight to be the one to take off his shoes for him. Athanasius says he wasn't inventing the faith, he was preserving it. But Polycarp's role went way beyond just preserving the faith. Oh yeah, he was also a fierce defender against anything he saw as heresy. Now, to get what the stakes were here, we need to quickly define this term, Docetism. This was a belief that basically threatened the entire core of Christianity. The idea was that Jesus only seemed human, and if his humanity and his suffering weren't real, well, then salvation itself could just be a phantom. And this is where the debate just explodes. Marcus looks up Polycarp's language, calling the theologian Marcion the firstborn of Satan, and sees blatant intolerance. But Athanasius sees a fierce act of love for the truth. He argues Polycarp was just echoing his teacher, John, who warned against anyone who denies that Jesus came in the flesh. But Marcus isn't done. He brings up another conflict, and this time it's not with a heretic. No, this one's with a fellow bishop. So Polycarp travels all the way to Rome to argue about the date of Easter with Bishop Anicetus. Now, Marcus frames this as just petty bickering over a calendar. But Athanasius sees it completely differently. For him, this is proof of Polycarp's wisdom and his humility. He knew the difference between a soul-destroying heresy and a regional tradition, and he stayed in full fellowship with Anicetus, even though they disagreed. Okay, so this brings us to his final days. When persecution ramps up back home in Smyrna, what Polycarp did next became a huge point of contention. Athanasius argues that Polycarp was absolutely not a coward. He was being wise as a serpent. He was following the Gospel's instructions not to just selfishly chase after martyrdom. He waited for a sign from God, a vision of his pillow on fire, making sure his sacrifice was on God's time, not his own. But then Marcus delivers a devastating counterpoint. Was this really divine wisdom, or was an old man's safety bought with the screams of children? It's a tough question. And when he was finally found and brought to the arena, well, this is where the accounts of his death enter the realm of the truly miraculous. Athanasius presents these events as the ultimate proof of a life of faith. I mean, just look at this list. A voice from heaven, flames that wouldn't touch him, a dove emerging from his body. This was a final, undeniable sign of God's favor, a spectacle meant to inspire and strengthen the church for centuries. But Marcus forces us to ask that critical question again. Are we reading a factual report of an execution, or are we reading a hagiography, a saint's life story, that was specifically crafted to turn a beloved bishop into a legendary martyr, designed to inspire people through sheer awe. So, in the end, we're left with these two incredibly powerful and totally different interpretations. For Athanasius, Polycarp is an icon, a timeless testament to the power of faith. For Marcus, he's a fascinating historical puzzle, a man whose legend became way more powerful than the man himself, whether the details were literally true or not. And that leaves us with one last question to chew on. What really matters more? The verifiable, nitty-gritty details of one man's death almost 2,000 years ago, or the enduring legacy of the powerful story it created?